Tuning into Sci-Fi TV, the viewer's guide to genre television for the week of August 7th to August 13th, 2021.
How did this happen? Where did it go? It should have been there last week's episode. I thought I was set up with my season pass. Now the new show is out, and I don't know what happened last week. How did my TiVo forget?
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Brent Barrett.
I'm Kevin Batchelder.
And I'm Wendy Hembrock.
And it's that time of year again when we tell you, like every episode, that you should join our Discord, which is a free service that we offer, or well, Discord offers, but we offer a little server there for tuning into Sci-Fi TV listeners, or tuners as you guys like to be called. And you can find a link in the show notes, and like I said, it's available for free on pretty much every platform, and we really enjoy our time there with folks, and we're talking constantly about new shows and all the shows that are on the air and old shows that are off the air, so it's a great place to be.
Yeah, we appreciate all the comments. You know, folks chipping in sometimes on the Tuner Minute with thoughts there that may not come to the show feedback stuff. So again, love that folks are finding their comfort level and interacting with us.
Yeah, it's great to see folks sharing about their experiences with different shows. We really appreciate it.
All right, now let's head on over to the spoiler-free water cooler.
Hi, Mark Bernardin.
Hi, Tricia Helfer.
It's probably time to announce this podcast that we've been threatening to do for months, right?
Fine idea. We are, Miss Helfer and I, the co-hosts of the Battlestar Galacticast, a new podcast that aims to revisit the groundbreaking award-winning sci-fi series Battlestar Galactica.
The one that featured me in an assortment of red dresses. Not the one with all the rad 70s hair.
Tricia was an integral member of the Battlestar cast, from when the miniseries launched in 2004 until the final episode in 2009. In fact, she's in the very first scene of the show, and the very last. She was also on Lucifer, Powers, Suits, Con Man, and yes, Rick and Morty. She fancy.
And Mark recapped Battlestar Galactica for Entertainment Weekly, where he was a senior editor. Now he co-hosts the Fat Man Beyond podcast with Kevin Smith, is a columnist for The Hollywood Reporter, and writes and produces television shows like Castle Rock and Treadstone. He's shiny.
Every week, we'll recap an episode of BSG, a show that I love to death.
And a show that I've never seen. At least not the way fans have. I'm looking forward to seeing what the big fracking deal is.
We'll also have special guests, members of the cast, behind-the-scenes players, and a famous fan or two to give us their perspectives and their memories on a show that we all love.
So, if you're a diehard fan or a fresh-faced nugget, the Battlestar Galacticast will have something in it for you. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts. We have a plan. Honest.
All right, first up in the water cooler, we have quick reviews for the shows that were on last week. We give them a rating of watch it now, watch it soon, let us know on the DVR. You can skip it, or you can give that rating too. That's fine if you want to let us know. Sunday, the 8th of August, we have Legends of Tomorrow, episode 11 of season 6, The Final Frame. I would give this one a low watch it soon.
I'd say a very solid watch it soon.
Yeah, go watch it soon.
All right, and also Rick and Morty, episode 8 of season 5, Rick Turnell, Friendshine of the Spotless Mort. I would actually give this one a low watch it now.
Not one that I watch.
I have not seen it.
All right, moving to Tuesday the 10th, we have Motherland, Fort Salem, episode 8 of season 2, Delusional. I'm not watching.
Very high watch it soon. Looking forward to talking about this. The season ends here in a couple of weeks.
Oh, nice. I am not watching.
And Stargirl is back, episode 1 of season 2, Summer School, chapter 1. I'm still not sure if my concerns are not an issue or not. It's a little unclear, but it's a watch it soon.
Yep, very solid watch it soon for me.
I agree. Solid watch it soon.
All right, and Superman and Lois, episode 14 of season 1, The Eradicator. I am not watching anymore.
Neither am I.
I'd give it a solid watch it soon.
And we have a premiere of the new version of Fantasy Island, which is not a remake, it's a continuation. Episode 1 of season 1, Hungry Christine and Mel Loves Ruby. I would give it a watch it soon. It was okay.
I'm not watching.
I would give it a low watch it soon, and I don't plan to watch anymore.
Oh, that's a shame. All right. Moving on. We'll talk about that in the back porch. I want to actually chat about that. Moving on to Thursday the 12th, we have Star Trek Lower Decks. It's back as well. Episode 1 of Season 2, Strange Energies. I'd say watch it soon.
Not one I watch.
I got all caught up with season 1, and I say watch it soon also.
All right, and The Outpost, episode 4 of season 4, They Bleed Black Blood. I am not watching.
Very low. Watch it soon.
Oh, that's too bad. I'm not watching.
So, thumbs up for Motherland, Fort Salem, thumbs down for The Outpost. Got it, Kevin. Also, we have the premiere of What If? It's the next in the Marvel series that both of my co-hosts forgot last week for some reason. But episode 1 of season 1, What If Captain Carter were the first Avenger? That's bad English, but I'll stick with it. And I would give this one a watch it now.
Not watching.
I love this. I say watch it now also.
Yeah, good stuff. Kevin really should watch this. The animation was so realistic looking that I don't think he would even notice it's animated.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the two of you talk about this.
All right. Moving on to the 13th of August, we have Star Wars The Bad Batch, season finale, episode 16 of season 1, Camino Lost. I would give it a high watch it soon.
Not what I'm watching.
I am not watching.
Oh, shame. All right. And also Surreal Estate, episode 4 of season 1, featuring Ghost Child. And done in the FT period like they do for a lot of music titles. I would give this one a high watch it soon.
Not a huge fan. Probably mid to low watch it soon.
Yeah, I would give it a watch it soon.
Interesting. All over the board. Okay. All right. Now for some feedback before we dive into some articles that we think you might like to read about or hear about. We have feedback from Craig and PA about answering the question we asked last week of folks, which was, with the new season and new shows coming along, what are you most excited about? Craig has an answer.
Wendy might know what I'm excited about because I've sent her some tweets asking her maybe it's time to start up a new podcast because, the Game of Thrones podcast is done. Maybe, Wendy, you could start the Women's Circle podcast. The White Tower and other podcasts are already taken. Maybe you come up with a cool name. What I'm talking about is the Wheel of Time. It looks like they're ready to go November 2021. Don't have an exact date, maybe around Thanksgiving. The countdown is on. Social media is all over the place. There's a great community out there on YouTube and podcasts. Everyone excited for this show. It's a completed series. It's not like Game of Thrones where we're going to run out of material. It's a completed series. Unfortunately, Robert Jordan, who passed away, the series was completed by Brandon Sanderson, and he did an incredible job. So we have all the material they need for 5 to 7 seasons. I'm excited. I know you brought it up in the news way back when, but we have a premiere date. So I'm excited. And there's so much TV to watch coming up next couple months.
Hey, great to hear from you again, Craig. Appreciate your thoughts there. And it's interesting, too, because while this is not a property that, I am heavily excited for or not planning to at least watch, but I have been noticing a lot more folks talking about different communities that are going, as you mentioned now, for many of these properties. I guess if we want to say, at least from my viewpoint, something that was nice to see that came out of the pandemic, if you will, was a lot more folks realizing that whether it's communities like on Discord, like we have for the podcast, or folks doing more podcasts or reactors or YouTubers planning, if you're a fan of an upcoming property, I'm seeing more and more folks, even in advance of premieres, getting some of this going. And I just love that aspect of it. So it was great to hear how excited you are. And, I'm certainly something I'll be looking forward to checking out.
Hey, Craig. Yeah, it was great to hear from you. I had heard actually from Kurt, I think, our friend Kurt in Canada, that Wheel of Time had been completed by another person who was deeply steeped in that world and very qualified to finish the series. So glad to hear that. I always associate Wheel of Time with the Legend of the Seeker of Sword of Truth book series. And for me, I'm going to hold off on any plans for a podcast until I see something of it first. Especially if it is going to be 5 to 7 seasons, because I just don't know if I'm going to have enough time to commit to that. But the thing that you mentioned about being a strong community already, I am actually eager to see how the established book lovers embrace this series, and I am looking forward to what's available online related to Wheel of Time. So thanks for contacting us.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I appreciate you answering my call for people to tell us what they're excited about. This is one that I'm kind of, looking at. Not really sure if I'm going to be too into it yet, but if and when it does come out, I'll give it a try just like Wendy. So thanks a lot. All right, moving on. We have some articles now, and Wendy's got some good news from FX.
Yeah, FX continues to support genre-y type stuff in its lineup. One series, Ryan Murphy's American Horror Story, has developed into a franchise with American Horror Stories, which is the anthology weekly series, and that has been renewed for another season. It'll get a season 2, and apparently it debuted in July with one of the most successful launches FX has done on Hulu so far. So sounds like it found its niche. And one that might be more interest to Kevin and Brent is the renewal of What We Do in the Shadows. We're going to get a 4th season coming back in 2022.
What We Do in the Shadows is a tremendously fun series. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's done in that kind of mockumentary style, but with a group of kind of misfit vampires who are pretty old. And a lot of comedy. It's just a great show. So I'm really glad to hear that one got renewed as well. American Horror Stories, I must have forgotten that it even existed, but an anthology horror show, maybe I'll go check out season 1 and see if it's something that's for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw, the American Horror Stories, several folks talking about the anthology format is really working for them there in season 1. Not that the show wasn't already well known, in its previous incarnation, but that this seemed to fit it well, like you're kind of saying, Brent. More folks, I guess, might have made it worth their while to go looking for it again now that it's, these are FX shows on Hulu. Kind of a different spot. And What We Do in the Shadows, I feel very much in a minority here, but, as much as I chuckled at some of it when I watched it, it just didn't stick. And we've talked many times, humor, sometimes just certain people, it just clicks, and don't for others. And unfortunately, I think I'm very much in a minority here, but it's not one I'm watching anymore.
Yeah, I tried to watch What We Do in the Shadows, and I found it entertaining, but not consistently making me laugh from episode to episode. I do watch it every once in a while if it's on and I land on it, I'll let it keep running in the background, and I do find it entertaining, but I don't know, for some reason it just hasn't sort of broken through as a priority to watch. The thing about the American Horror Stories is, maybe around Halloween time, I might be interested in dipping into an episode or two. It's just, I'm not a regular consumer of horror, so it might work better for me than American Horror Story with the season-long stories, because some of those, if I didn't like the characters or I didn't particularly like the kind of genre that they were going into, I quickly lost interest. So I might check it out again on Hulu.
Well, that serious nature of it doesn't work. Remember, we also have Chucky coming.
Yeah, that would be a hard pass. Again, because humor is subjective.
Very much so. I get it.
Yeah, I totally get what you guys are saying about What We Do in the Shadows, and I can see where you're coming from, because in my case, the comedy is inconsistent in that show. I laugh out loud probably more than Kevin did. But there are bits that are kind of like, that fall flat for me, and other bits that are not terribly interesting. But the thing, and we've talked about this before, all of us have talked about this, the thing that really has gotten me hooked on that show and why I love it is I've just fallen in love with the characters. So literally they could not be funny, and I'm interested in what they're doing. So in that sense, the show is really working for me.
Makes sense.
All right, I've got a link to a trailer we've all been waiting for from Netflix, the Lucifer final season trailer. It's coming out on September 10th on Netflix, so everybody get ready. But the trailer is, I've talked before about how, and I think we all have, about how Lucifer tends to every season kind of reinvent itself, because you get some sort of a big revelation that changes the playing field, and everything kind of shifts. And this one, of course, changed quite a bit at the end of the last season. And this trailer just shows that they're rolling with it, you know. It's no spoilers, but I just want to say that Chloe seems to really be all in on these particular changes that have happened, and I thought that was very funny. And it looks like it's going to be a lot of good fun, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I was very pleased. You know, I had a couple of dings on season 5B for me, just for Kevin. Most people are very, very positive, but no, this trailer made me, again, even more excited, especially knowing it's the end and they can write to the end, you know, some of the things that have been out there. So from the humor to the storylines to, without getting spoilery, some of the characters and what it's going to mean for them in the last season. You know, very attached to this crew, so I'm very much interested in where they go.
Yeah, I loved this trailer. It definitely got me very intrigued about where they're going to go, especially when one particular character showed up on screen. I'm like, oh, I hope this is real and not a dream sequence or something, or an alternate reality episode. It looks like they're really kind of throwing everything at it as they go out with a big swing in terms of story, characters, homage type stuff, musical numbers. It looks like it's going to be a really fun ride to the finish.
Yeah, and that's, I think, part of what I hopefully sensed, just as you said, and would love to see. Again, knowing it's the end, man, throw it all. I mean, this show has got so many cool things they could do now that we don't have to worry about holding any story bits or extending them a little bit to make them last. So, yeah, there's real potential here for, and especially where it's like a shorter season than we've got in the past too. There's not going to be much time for kind of, shall we say, side journeys, however interesting they might have been. We're going to have to cut to it quick.
Yeah, they won't be able to draw things out or build to some sort of cliffhanger anymore. They're just going to have fun, and I think that's great. Okay, Kevin, you've got some news about Doom Patrol.
I do, for fans of the show, because we're coming into season 3. We've got the official teaser, as it's being called by HBO Max. Link in the show notes, over a minute. And again, this is not a show that I watch, so I don't know how much this is different or similar to previous seasons, but the trailer is very stylized. You've got some of your characters here. Might be a little bit on some plot stuff, but I think it's a little more, again, being a teaser where they're just saying, you know, here are some of our characters and let's have a little fun with some visuals and where they might be going. And then you can, you know, take a look and run with it from there. Because we've got, as of the time of this recording, probably just over a month before it premieres on HBO Max.
Yeah, I am watching Doom Patrol. I'm about halfway through season 2 right now. I had found this one late. Folks had recommended it, and people on Discord included. And I'm not sure how, but one day I started watching it on HBO Max and got hooked. Really liked the characters, and the trailer looked really interesting to me because it is, I haven't gotten to the end of season 2 yet, so it starts up with a premise that I'm assuming is where we're going to resolve what happened in season 2, and very similar to season 1 transitioning into season 2. They solve one problem and create another big one, which kind of becomes like the larger issue for the group to handle in season 2. It looks like they're going with that in season 3. And the thing that was exciting for me, because I haven't finished watching season 2 yet, is to see that it looks like most of the characters are back, which I'm excited about. So, yeah, this is cool. And now I have a deadline to finish season 2.
Yeah, every once in a while I get to a point where I've watched all my YouTube subscriptions. I've watched all the new videos. I've watched all the new shows that came out this week that I recorded in Hulu or whatever. And I think to myself, what else what is there to watch? I want to watch something while I'm doing other work. And usually I fall back to some like recorded reality shows or something. But one of these days I need to remember that this show looks really cool. And I should start watching it. It's just HBO Max isn't somewhere I go when I'm looking for something to watch. I usually go to my Hulu DVR to see some old shows that I've recorded that I haven't watched yet that aren't genre shows. But I need to remember this one and check it out. It looks cool.
I've heard that things like lists could help with that.
Yeah, I'm not that kind of person.
I'm not that person either. But Brett, I was going to mention that The other show that you might be interested in also on HBO Max is Titans. And the interesting thing about Titans is they actually include the characters from Doom Patrol somewhat in that show, which I did not expect. And I just happened to watch an episode of Titans and I'm like, hey, that's Brendan Fraser's voice. And hey, that's one of the other characters from Doom Patrol. So it was kind of cool.
Is this Titans or Teen Titans? Are they the same thing?
It's called Titans, but it's the same characters that we think of. It's, the
Robin, whatever he is.
Nightwing, the alternate, not the Dick Grayson Robin. He is in it, but so is the other is Robin 2.0. And, it's that gang.
And it's not animated, right? Or is
No, it's not animated.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Maybe I'll check that out too. It's not animated, Kevin. You could check it out too.
Duly noted. I'll put that on my list.
Down at the bottom. I got it.
With an asterisk next to it. Don't watch this.
All right. Well, Wendy, you've got another link for us for about Into the Night?
Yes, this is the series on Netflix. Season 2 is coming. We have what's called an official teaser, and it's pretty long for a teaser. It's a whole minute, but it is teasery. And my memory was not good of season 1 before we hit record on our mics. I was asking Kevin and Brent to remind me what show this was. I actually went back and watched the teaser one more time. And part of the reason that I was struggling was because the trailer, the way they formatted it, you don't see the characters' faces very clearly. And some of the ones I was associating with the show don't seem to be in this teaser. The series is coming back on September 8th, so right around the corner. You have time to watch season 1 if you haven't, to get ready for season 2.
Yeah, I did remember this one. I honestly, if you just said the name of the title, I would have probably gone total blank. It's like, I think I may have heard of that show. And then as soon as Kevin mentioned one thing about the plane, I was like, oh yeah, I remember the show perfectly. It's a foreign language show from Netflix. I think I watched it with subtitles and dubbing, which is what I usually do for these things. I really thoroughly enjoyed the first season. I thought it was pretty cool. It ended really dramatically. And, this teaser does kind of a cool job of teasing, which is what it's supposed to do. So, I'm now excited to see season 2.
Yeah, I remember this being, one of those pleasant surprise ones when I checked it out. I wasn't expecting much, and it was like, well, that definitely did a great job keeping me engaged. An interesting story. And again, without being spoilery, this happened with several other shows where, the initial premise has to change a bit once you're going to do more than just one season, and it's how well do you adapt it when you're changing a bit of the premise or the setting, to see how it works. So on both counts, I'm very interested to see how they approach it and, will I be as engaged with it? But I'm definitely looking forward to it because, again, it was such a pleasant surprise that first season.
Yep, September 8th. Mark your calendars. I'll be checking it out. All right, we're going to wrap up the water cooler this time with a Tuner Minute, like always. This one was recorded by Wendy, and it's entitled Expired.
Today, my question is about managing your lists, and specifically 2 kinds of lists. One is things stored possibly on your DVR or saved, and things on your to-watch list on your streaming channels. And I'm wondering if the things that are on those lists ever expire for you, meaning regardless of space, if it's a DVR storage, can things be on your list so long that you're never going to watch them and ultimately you delete them because they've kind of expired in your interest? It seems like we no longer have the constraints of running out of space like we may have had even in the last few years with DVRs. So I'm curious, though, if there's been any mindset change that's gone along with the anytime, anywhere availability of content. Do you actually try to prune your lists, or do you just let things pile up for someday?
Well, that's a good question, Wendy, because the answer is yes for me. There's been a couple of cases in the last few years where I've said on this podcast that I kind of missed an episode or missed a couple of episodes of something and they're building up on the DVR, and I'll hear one of you guys give a rating for something. I say, oh, that's cool. I'm still recording them on the DVR. I'll check them out and get caught up. And a couple of instances of that where I've, been looking at that every once in a while and then looked at it and it was like, 12, 20 episodes. And I'm like, I'm never going to watch this. And I just delete it. So that has happened. On the online services, there's sometimes, I don't know if this is directly what you're talking about, but sometimes there are shows that you want to watch that, are going to be leaving the service, and I don't think that's ever happened to me, but I have sometimes been inspired to watch things that indicate that they're leaving, even if I had never really wanted to watch them before. It's like, oh, I've heard of that, or I was kind of curious about that, and it looks like it's going to be leaving, so maybe I should check it out real fast, and I've done that. But I don't think, apart from the DVR, yes, I have deleted major recordings of things that, and I do this all the time with non-genre stuff. I had, Treehouse Masters, which is a show that I kind of liked. I had 50 episodes saved up and finally just deleted them all. I'm like, I'm never going to catch up on this. And there were some other reality shows like that I was kind of mildly curious about and had watched a couple of episodes and was kind of enjoying them, and then just started letting them build up, and finally went back and said, 86 episodes of The Little Couple I'm not going to watch, so I'll delete that. Things like that. But for genre, it has happened a couple times. But yeah, I'm not afraid to do it. Usually, I think that's just an extension of those shows that I just give up on, right? Because we talk about that all the time. I'll watch a couple of episodes of a show and I'll just say, this is not for me, and I'll just give up on it. Sometimes I let it continue to record and build up, and then yeah, I'll delete them when I realize I'm never going to see it.
Yeah, it's kind of going back a little bit in time for me when I think on that topic, because the last couple of years, I don't think that the physical aspect of it, if you call physical, recordings in a cloud, that aspect, the DVR maybe recording aspect of it, hasn't really impacted me, because there's very little that I record that I'm not watching, promptly within a week or so. Otherwise, very honestly, I don't bother to record it, because I know with some of the different services like Hulu and online availability for many of the networks, the episodes are going to be there anyway. So if I do have an interest, or I do decide something is worth the watch, it's probably going to be there at no cost, or maybe a very minimal cost if I want to do away with commercials, for a service I might have that's at a commercial level. For sporadic watching, if I decide it's binge time, I might pay a few bucks more to go up to commercial free, to do it that way. But many of you, I shouldn't say all of you, hopefully some new listeners in here, maybe many of you know the guy with the lists. If I've decided I'm eventually going to watch it, there is a list there. It may not have dates on it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to pile up the recordings. Now, if it was something, that wasn't easily available, and I did somehow notice that it was going to be airing on a network or something on cable that I might then set a recording for, I suppose that might be one of those things, actually having it on the DVR, knowing it wasn't easy to get my hands on. Let's face it, if it's one of 4 or 5 or 10 shows that I haven't decided anything's more interesting to me yet, the fact that I have some recordings that might expire, that sometimes happens with some of these network things. I've noticed that with some things I've had on my DVR, just keeping for a while. Eventually, these networks put expiration dates where the recording will disappear. So, because again, I've mentioned this before too, the awesome website justwatch.com and the accompanying app for smartphones. I got an interest in something, I just go there, find it, see it where it is, and since I subscribe to many of the, the Netflixes, Amazons, Hulus, odds are I'm going to find it pretty quickly. So if I have that urge, I don't need the aspect of having already recorded it to whatever type of DVR that might be.
The reason this came up was because I was going through, I want to say it was Netflix list, looking for stuff, and I was like, oh man, I got a lot of stuff on here. It's like, why is this even on here anymore? Why did I save this to actually put in the list versus just hit upon it if the mood strikes me, kind of a thing. And then I actually saw an article recently, apparently, I think the New York Times does this all the time. It tells you what's going away on Netflix every month. And I actually read one of them because I was like, wow, stuff goes away. I didn't really realize that. But to be fair, Netflix is not my go-to. It's not my first call for streaming. Lately it's been HBO Max because there's been a lot of content on HBO Max that I've been watching. And it does seem to be for me that the channel I'm watching something particular about is also the streaming channel that I'm going to go to first to look for something else. So that was part of the reason why I was wondering about this question is sort of, if people kind of clean house on these lists periodically, because that's what I ended up doing because I was like, what? If I haven't watched this and it's been on the list for like 4 or 5 years, I don't think it needs to be on the list anymore. So I'd be curious to hear other strategies for how they manage their watch lists.
Now, Wendy, a question for you. As you're just describing a slightly different take than what I commented on with Netflix, you can create what you just mentioned, your watch list. And I do admit that I will periodically put things on there, and when I'm in Netflix watching something else, I might then relook at that and do, as you said, like, why did I pick this show or movie? I'm never going to watch that, to take it off that list. So, that's not actually a set of recordings, or as you will. I mean, maybe similar in nature. One thing that I did find interesting, though, especially for the ones that are ongoing series or shows, having them on that watch list is helpful in the Netflix world, certainly, because there's some things I don't pay a lot of attention to. Like there's a series they had called The Movies That Made Us, documentary series, that I greatly enjoyed when they had their first season 2-3 years ago. And I was just stumbling through my Netflix watch list a couple of weeks ago and got the little prompt they put up there, new episodes that they had come out with a season 2 that I didn't even know was out. Not exactly genre, but again, the kind of things that, when I look to fill a few minutes and I don't have to be a dedicated show I'm really focused towards, I was able to at least see that that's there. So I do use that in kind of a reminder way for some things that I might have had an interest in.
Oh, yeah. I hear you on that with shows that I'm waiting for the next season to come. Yes, I'll absolutely leave those in for sure.
Kevin, on a tangential note to something you said, which isn't directly related to the Tuner Minute, but you talked about how shows that if you want to see them, you don't record them anymore because they're available. It's interesting. I used to have a dish DVR that I record everything on, and I would leave the recordings on there for the podcast recordings, the ones we did for the show. I'd leave them on there till after we were done recording in case I wanted to go back and check something. If somebody said, oh, there was this thing in the show, and I'm like, I didn't see that. Then I'd have something to go back to quickly and look at. But on the Hulu DVR now, I find myself, after I've watched something, I just delete it now because I don't keep it anymore because I realize I could go watch it on Hulu. If I was able to record it on Hulu because of live TV, I'm actually able to go back to the on-demand version of it as well, even if it's not something that normal, regular Hulu subscribers can get to. So I found myself deleting that stuff too, so I don't keep that around anymore. It's just a related note that's not directly related to this particular topic.
But it is that, and these other things we've talked about here related to this is just so fascinating where, for us, get off my lawn crowd, go back a few years and we didn't have any of these options, having little reminders for a show on a Netflix watch list or having almost unlimited storage space. I mean, I don't know about you folks, but just going back not many years, God, that DVR space was cherished. I mean, I had to make sure I was only recording things I knew I'd get to because I was always running up to 80-90% of the space. And now I don't even come close to it. And my cable company is offering, tons more gigs for like $2 a month or something. And I don't even need it. So it's just, everything is shifting constantly.
What's your default, by default, how many hours of content can you store on your DVR in the cloud, Kevin?
Let's see. In my case, the Xfinity, hundreds of hours. I don't know how much, though. I don't know how much it is.
Yeah. When I signed up for Hulu DVR, they initially gave us 100 hours. And we started filling that up rapidly. And the reason I said we started filling that up is because Hulu lets you have multiple, logins or multiple profiles for the same login. And each profile gets their own shows, but they share a common DVR space. So my wife's shows and my daughter's shows we're quickly filling up that 100 hours. And then suddenly one day when we were getting close to 100 hours, it bumped to 200 hours. I don't know if that's an automatic thing. Our rate didn't go up. They didn't charge us more money. I think they just increased it for everybody across the board, maybe. But now we're at 200 hours, and that seems kind of comfortable.
Yeah, and in my case too, I also noticed that even on that Xfinity plan, once it was cloud-based, because, again, years ago, it was a physical DVR in the box in my house, there were a couple of occasions where, same idea, my wife, daughter, son-in-law were all using the same service. We did actually exceed 100%. Didn't delete any of our stuff. Not like we had it there like for weeks, but we were well over 100 for quite a while. So they're pretty forgiving even, in that sense, rather than the old physical days where no, it would have, wiped out something or given you an error when you ran out of physical space.
Excellent. All right. Well, if you want to talk about Wendy's Tuner Minute or how much space you have on your cloud DVR, let us know in Discord or comments or voicemail. We'd appreciate it. Now let's head on over to the spoiler-filled back porch. Today we talk about Stargirl, What If, Star Wars The Bad Batch, and Fantasy Island. First up on the back porch, Kevin's going to talk about Stargirl.
Yeah, and it's not like I have a detailed discussion. I have a couple observations I wanted to bring out and maybe get some general thoughts, because as many of you know, if you've been listening for a while, there has been definitely some trepidation or concern as we get into season 2. The move to the CW, is it going to start to change? And you can't or I don't think you should be making a judgment on one episode. But I did want to make an observation. Along with enjoying the episode, great to see Court and the gang back. It had been quite a while, I think close to a year since we got that season 1 finale. I forgot how long it had, been. Again, COVID times, not the shocker. So it was just kind of nice to be back, with these characters. And they brought us in pretty quickly with some new concerns and a flashback there early in the episode. But to me, the meat of it was getting to see the gang back together. And as we've seen in previews and promos, the idea that, Court's all fired up to have the team together, but there ain't much happening. There's no real reason for them to be patrolling. And, being a high school based superhero, she's let her studies lax, which is what's going to give us, I think, for about half the season, our storyline of summer school. But I thought it was good. We got, to see most everybody back, and it was just nice to see there. It wasn't like it was a big content episode. That's why the rating wasn't that high. It was enjoyable to have it back. The observation that I really caught is that, as I mentioned, I think the last time we recorded, last episode, I talked about that Chuck rewatch that I stumbled into. And one thing that I noticed in that Chuck rewatch is when I got to the beginning and went to season 2, how, the very first episode of season 2 was very much a let's all get reacquainted to the characters and the story thing. I felt a little, I won't say cheated, but maybe not quite as enjoying that first episode as someone who watched all of season 1 naturally, because you could tell they're doing hey, we've got a show that's, done a little better than maybe we thought. We got to make sure that we get new viewers up to speed. So a good portion of that first episode of season 2 of Chuck was just recapping who the characters were, who the storylines, the relationships, the problems, and so forth. And I thought that we got a good amount of that here in Stargirl. Along with the storyline of, there's not much going on and Court's kind of screwed up her schoolwork. We spent a good amount of time reintroducing each of the characters and some of the things that have happened, the good guys, the bad guys, and all there. So again, I'm all for it if it helps to keep the show strong, but from a content for someone who's been a fan, there wasn't a ton of new stuff here. So I'm very curious if either of you or some of the listeners had that same feeling more than anything else.
Yeah, it was great to get this show back. It did feel like some, I'll call it table setting, to kind of reestablish who's who and what's going on with them, which I actually appreciated because I haven't really thought about Stargirl since I watched it, and that was a while ago. It feels like anyway. I don't know. Time moves differently these days for me sometimes. So I did like that we kind of got the update on, Beth's parents are getting divorced. Rick has got a lot of doubts about what's going on with him. Yolanda, one of the things I really liked about season 1 was that relationship she developed with Brainwave and how that's now changed. So, to me, that just felt like establishing that we're going to have plot for all the characters and not just Court, as well. So I was okay with that, as kind of, bringing us back to a starting point for everybody to jump off of. And, but I hope we do start moving in the next episode.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Kevin. There's a lot of reestablishing. I mean, the whole Courtney thing reminding us that she's a high schooler and that she had, her parents had agreed to let her do this stuff if she kept her school up, and she was having problems in school, failing classes, and had to take summer school, which is the whole point of this title of this, right? The whole thing with Artemis reminding us of her parents being arrested and all that stuff. And the fact that she and Courtney don't get along. And all of the characters. I mean, there was a little bit of progression, like the reboot of the AI where he doesn't remember her. It's kind of sad, actually. And a little bit of like we had at the end of the last season, the whole, potential Starman coming back sort of thing. Little bits of progression in that regard, but it was basically kind of a, hey, here we are. This is where we left off, remember, and here we go, sort of episode. So, I'm not sure. The tone feels slightly different. I have to say, and I don't know if that's just my preconcerns, right? Because I've came into this thinking CW screws everything up. And I don't know if I'm sensing slight differences in the tone of the show because of that. Or there really are differences in the tone of the show, or maybe this is just the first episode of the second season thing like you talked about, and I just need to wait and watch more. I will point out that the new character that I'm really loving and is the highlight of this episode for me is the assistant to the stepfather who found the robot, and as he's describing how he can put a flamethrower in, he's like, well, I really wanted this to be a private interview. I'll go get my tools. I love that guy.
Yeah, that could be fun. And I did just quickly look it up, and it was exactly a year between the season 1 finale airing and the season 2 premiere. So along with any new viewers, I do think, as you both mentioned, this was a case of, hey, it's been a year since we've been around. We probably need to remind everybody where things were at. So I agree, Brent. Then I think the next 2 episodes, not having looked ahead at anything, but just conceptually here, what they do now that we've got everything reset on the table, if you will, or reminded it. Now we're going to find out, are they going to jump and move quickly like I thought we did in season 1 with some story bits, or is it going to be, unfortunately, having some of that CW flavor of, no, everybody slow down the story. We'll see.
All right. Well, from DC to Marvel, Wendy's going to talk about the premiere of What If?
So I thank Marvel for choosing to go first in this What If, this alternate timeline version of stories that they started with my favorite movie in the MCU and my favorite character, Captain America, the first Avenger. And they really start with that story. And, the title says it all. What if Captain Carter became Agent Carter became Captain America instead of Steve? She takes the serum and not Steve. And it was delightful. I just loved everything about it. I have not watched the movie in a while, so I'm sure it did a fantastic job of nodding to, many, many details from the movie. But the things I loved are all about the relationship between Steve and Peggy, that they actually retained this whole idea about, you owe me a dance, and how they're going to reconnect. And I really liked that Peggy takes the serum, but that doesn't mean that Steve is just, out of the war, stuck on the sidelines. Instead, he becomes Howard Stark's focus for what they call the Hydra Stomper. And honestly, I don't remember this in the movie, but my assumption was it was like proto Iron Man. And that was wonderful to see. And it was just great how they took these brief moments. The whole thing started with the one change from the movie version of events, which is Peggy stays in the room when Steve's about to take the serum and the bomb goes off, and then she has to make the choice, because Steve gets shot, to take, it's now or never. She takes it. And thematically, she's still dealing with the same issues. And so is Steve in terms of him being counted out for his, physical size and her being discounted because she's a woman. So I liked how they actually made Howard Stark a more, I would say, sympathetic character. We got the Howling Commandos back. We got Bucky not turning into the Winter Soldier in this alternate storyline. He still had a lot of great funny lines. And we continued the chase for Red Skull and the Tesseract. I loved that, it was calamari and that giant mutant, that Red Skull had created. And it was just a very engrossing time. I think the episode was like 45 minutes long, but it really felt like a lot longer than that. I just loved it. They had pretty much everybody back playing or voicing, I should say, their characters. Not Chris Evans, unfortunately, but, many of the others, including Haley Atwell, of course, as Agent Carter. I loved the fighting style that they gave her. I loved how they made her costume, putting the British flag on instead of the star in the middle of the shield. It was just so much fun. But it also still had that emotional heart that was the part of the thing I really liked about, both Steve and Peggy as characters. They were so committed to their jobs in the war effort, but also, they had this really true romance, that I loved. And, so for me, this was a total winner as the starting episode. They also have a nice setup here where, there's the Watcher telling the story. It almost, at one point I was almost going to say, in the Twilight Zone, it had that, a good use of a narrator, as similar and as strong as Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone, with the narrator who calls himself the Watcher in this series as well.
Yeah, the guy who took over the voice for Chris Evans did a really good job of bringing out Captain America. Both, I guess he was only Scrawny Steve at any point in time, but he did a really good job. So you didn't really notice that Chris Evans wasn't there. From what I understand from other people who've talked about this episode before, because I didn't remember the first Avenger that clearly, every last little detail, but the reason that the explosion happened before Steve went through this time, wasn't just because she stayed on the ground, but when she stayed in the theater, all the other guests stayed in the theater with her. And one of the guests, of course, was the German spy. So that's why he had the ability to disrupt it before it happened, so he could steal more of the formula. That was his goal. And of course, Peggy put an end to that pretty quickly. But I loved this too. I loved how, everything unfolded, but it unfolded slightly differently. We had some of the great iconic scenes, like breaking out of the door with all the guys, and Peggy in the front with the shield with her. The one time she used a gun, just like the one time Captain America used the gun. Same scene. And I love the bits where she first was in the field, where she flipped that truck. That was just awesome. And her reaction to it, brilliant.
Yeah.
Let's have another go.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yep.
And the action is just so much more intense here because of the animation. And the animation, like I told Kevin earlier, is very realistic. I mean, it's not, you don't think it's like computer generated, replacements for humans sort of thing, but it's really smooth and really good animation. And the fights were so brutal with her, much more so than they were ever able to do with, the live action, Steve Rogers. And there were other people who were saying, asking the question, is she stronger than Steve? And that kind of makes sense because Steve was a scrawny little weakling and then he was boosted up. She was already, mature, not a weakling, not scrawny. So it's possible she could be stronger. It's definitely a reality that she's a better fighter, out of the gate than Steve was, because she'd already been a very good fighter because of her training as an agent of the SSR and all that stuff. But it was wonderful to see the parallel and before I even get there, I loved, and I even talked about it in my reaction, I just absolutely loved that the romantic feelings and love between the two of them were still there, and that it was proof. This was absolute proof that she didn't fall in love with Steve Rogers because he became all muscular and strong and everything. She fell in love with him because she fell in love with the person that he was, and she was falling in love before he even went through the machine. And this is just proof of it, right? I mean, she still really likes him and even calls him her hero, and then corrects it and says a hero,
Yep.
I loved all that bit. And the end was very well paralleled. Love he says, "Hey, you want me to dance?" And she says, "Yes, Saturday night," and then she goes through just like he went into the ice. And then she comes out where Loki came out, which is interesting in 2012 Avengers. But around the same time, the Cap was unfrozen and recovered from the ice, but, really cool parallels. And I'm hearing conflicting things about the future of this series or this season. In the trailers, there are scenes where Captain Carter is in other episodes. Like there's a scene where she's meeting Doctor Strange. So I'm thinking that a lot of people thought this was a pure anthology. Every one of these is completely independent, but I'm thinking maybe at least the seasons will be slightly connected, and this might be following this whole new universe and all the different changes that are happening in this whole new universe as a result. But yeah, it was really cool to see that Howard Stark had created the first Iron Man Mark 0 or Mark 1, whatever you want to call it, and put Steve in it. And they got the Tesseract early, which would allow them to do that. But then, of course, like you said, Red Skull gets the Tesseract by capturing Steve and getting it out of the machine. And a lot of people were confused about how he got it back. It was because of the machine, because of the Iron Man suit, and opening up the portal. And that's it was a really cool take on this. And I would love to see a live action Captain Carter. The problem is I don't think Haley Atwell can get that buff, but or that tall. But I'd still love to see her in live action.
Oh yeah, I mean, I loved Agent Carter, the series, and I would love to see her as Captain Carter for sure. I hope we get to see more maybe set in this universe, or maybe in that other timeline. Captain Carter isn't just a one-off. That might have happened in other versions of the timeline as well.
Yeah, come on, Kevin.
I haven't ruled it out. That's what I told you. That's a big step for me. And I've seen tons of positive comments from many others on social media. So I suspect I may give this a try here. I'm not saying right away, but I suspect I will.
Well, Kevin, I will say that, the animation in this compared to Ruby is way more realistic. So if animation bothers you, I think you would get quickly engrossed in the story, similar to Ruby.
And I'm also, like you, a big fan of Haley Atwell and Agent Carter and so forth. So this has got a lot going for it for me to at least give it a try.
And you're right, Wendy. Jeffrey Wright did a dang great job with the voice of the Watcher. I love the tone that he had. In my reaction, I even mentioned a very obscure, for a lot of people probably, reference, which is Stan Freberg. He did a Stan Freberg Presents the United States of America radio series or radio show. It was an album, I think, actually. And he had a narrator on there. It might have even been him. I'm not sure. But the tone that he had in Stan Freberg Presents was spot on to the tone that Jeffrey Wright had when he was describing the premise and the setup for the story. It really brought me back. It was just really well done.
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
All right. Well, we're going to move on now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the season finale of Star Wars: The Bad Batch. This is a animated show that Kevin probably won't ever watch, mostly because he's not as big of a Star Wars fan as a lot of us, and the animation isn't quite as realistic as What If. But Star Wars: Bad Batch, this Camino Lost episode, I mean, this whole season, I'm going to talk about the whole season a bit and the finale for anybody who's also watched it or is curious. This thing started out with Order 66 in the beginning of the season. And our Bad Batch crew was on a planet helping out another squad of clones and a Jedi who were fighting some separatists, some droids. And then Order 66 happened and our guys weren't really affected, although it looked like, one of them was the sniper whose name I can't remember all of a sudden. Crosshair. He was affected, it seemed. And so our guys get split up from Crosshair, right? And Crosshair goes working for the Empire and starts setting up, Dark Troopers and all that. You know, he was like a prototype Dark Trooper and stuff, and was, kind of really obsessed with hunting down the Bad Batch. And it leads to eventually a confrontation back on Kamino, which is the planet where all the clones were created and where they all grew up and everything. They kind of called it home, where he had captured one of the Bad Batch, his leader, and Hunter, and the others had come to save him, and there was a big confrontation where, you know, he expressed that he was mostly bitter. Crosshair was mostly bitter that they had left him, that they'd abandoned him. Even though he was fighting them on episode 1 because of the effects of the chip and Order 66, he was fighting them. He felt, you know, resentful that they didn't try to save him. Which was surprising. Nobody really thought that was going to come from him. And also we find out later on when they're convinced that the reason he's acting bad and he's working for the Empire is because the chip is still in his head. He says, no, I had that thing removed a long time ago. Meaning, I don't think he meant he had it removed before the beginning of the series. I think he had it removed shortly after, probably because it was damaged because he had suffered a head trauma at one point in one of the episodes. So he'd had it removed, but he said, no, we're soldiers and this is who I am. This is where we belong. The Empire is trying to do something grand and epic, and that's what we were made to do. Why aren't we on the Empire? And he's basically doing kind of a Darth Vader thing, you know, come join me, and offering an extension to the team to join him. And they, at one point they fight together to fight off some droids that Omega had called to help save them, which was kind of backfired on them, but and then they have that final confrontation where, Hunter has to knock him out, with a stun blast. And they take his stuff, they bind, you know, they carry him, they're going to take him back, they're going to figure out what to do with him, that he's their brother, so they're going to take him with them. And, meanwhile, the Empire has decided they're going to destroy Kamino. Kamino is no longer of any use, they don't want anybody else getting any of the secrets, so they have some cruisers lower down into the atmosphere and just blow it to bits while the Bad Batch is in there. And there's this last episode is just a struggle of them going from one cliffhanger to another cliffhanger to another cliffhanger, from one, we're safe, to, oh my God, we need to get out of here sort of moment, as they're scrambling to get out of the sinking and collapsing and just, facility. And they finally, get back to their ship at the very end. And Crosshair, who had helped, during the process, Omega had saved Crosshair. And at the end, Crosshair saves Omega, and he's like, we're even now, and he doesn't want to come with him. He just kind of is left there, which I'm a little curious about too, because if he's expecting the Empire to pick him up, the Empire just thought they destroyed everything and left. So why would they ever come back? But I imagine somebody will come by at some point, some scavenger or something will come by, and he'll get picked up. But this also, we learned a lot more about Omega, who's the girl. Who is their sister. She's a clone too. She was just manipulated to be female as opposed to male. And we find out that she's actually older than all of them. In the last 2 episodes, we find out that she was there in the secret lab, which is the way they got in because the Empire didn't know about it. She was there because she had been created there. She was there and she was aware. So she must have been a few years old at least, was aware of the creation of the Bad Batch. So she said she was there when they were born. When they were created. And we find out that she's basically their older sister, even though she's much younger than them, in appearance. She's their older sister, which I thought was really cool too. But it was a really cool season of getting to this Bad Batch. There were some slow bits, where they did these side missions. I talked about that before, I think, where, they kind of tried the Mandalorian thing with doing side missions, but it didn't really work out that well. I don't think it was well done. But the main story was really good.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I had mentioned that I was kind of putting this one on my list. I don't know where it falls in the priority of the list, but now that I'm caught up with the Lower Decks Star Trek series, it'll probably bump up a little bit from where it was.
Excellent. All right. Well, we don't expect Kevin to watch it, so I guess what I'll do now is move on to talk a little bit about Fantasy Island. I know that Wendy liked it, or maybe didn't like it. She's not going to watch it anymore, but I kind of liked it. And the reason I kind of liked it, there's some things I want to ding about Fantasy Island. Let me set up the premise first of all. This is not a remake. This is, Mr. Rourke's, grandniece, I guess you would call it, because I think she said he was her granduncle, I think. He was her granduncle. So she's related. She's in the family. She even talks a bit in the intro, gives everybody kind of a little bit of exposition where, she says that this is her family's, role. This is their purpose. And, for generations, her family has made people's lives better, by doing this whole Fantasy Island thing. And, so she's there. She's now in charge. She's a Rourke as well. There's no tattoo. Sorry. But they do bring on a character, who's one of the visitors who, makes a joke about the trailer for the next episode where she says, what do I just say? The plane? So they brought another person in. But I'm a little upset with one thing. And that is, and I guess this is modern TV. They think that they need love interests for main characters. They have to have love interests. And it kind of drives me crazy because Mr. Rourke, I don't think had at least not an ongoing love interest in the 70s version of this show. But they introduce her, his grandniece, and all of a sudden they introduce a guy who clearly is going to be a love interest, for her, who's the pilot of the plane. You know, we never saw the pilots really in the original series, but this guy is like buddy with her, and she talks to him, privately, on a deck and on a porch and talks to him about her problems. And I'm like, come on, we don't need this. Why did you do this? I want the Rourkes to be mysterious. That's the whole point of them. You don't know anything about them. And instead they're just opening her up and exposing her and all of her inner emotions and her relationships. And I'm like, oh, come on. But I guess that's a modern thing. And it kind of irks me a little bit about this since I did enjoy Fantasy Island, the original. But these two stories were interesting. I mean, Hungry Christine, a news anchor who grew up with an abusive stepfather who basically forced her to stay in shape and to be pretty and to be successful and stuff. And she resented that. And she just wanted a place where she could just let loose and just do what she wanted to do. Just do, which really manifested itself by just eating everything in sight because that's what she could never do and not gain any weight. Right. That was the key. But she has to deal with her daddy issues, for lack of a better word, as well. And that's what Rourke establishes by, again, this is why this is a genre show. Her father had died like 9 years ago, and her father appears on the island and starts, berating her again and stuff, and she has to confront him. And there's just one scene at the end, which is kind of weird, where they're like, Rourke's taking her to her final meal, and the final meal is her stepfather roasting on a spit. And I'm like, okay. And then it's a little unclear if that actually happened, because at the end, Rourke is kind of saying, oh, the pig roast. And she's like, oh yeah, the pig roast. Yeah. Did she just imagine that or what's going on? It's very weird, very creepy. But the Mel Loves Ruby part, I love the most. That's why I really gave this a higher rating. The Mel Loves Ruby, I love that storyline. And I loved how it ended with, she was offered by Rourke to stay on the island, and to be an assistant, basically, be her tattoo or whatever. And because she was about to die. I mean, in the real world, she was days, weeks, maybe months away from a fatal illness, and she was going to die. And she just wanted, they just brought her here for one last, great time when they were young. They went to a fountain of youth and they both became young, the husband and wife. And, so she's offered this position and initially she talks to her husband and says, hey, isn't this been great for us? And he's like, I think that was just for you, honey. And that very emotional bit where, I had to put myself in this position with my wife. If I was in the exact same situation and I knew that I was going to go home with her and she was going to die and leave me, or I knew that she could leave me now, but live out a whole new life, in happiness and youth and health, I would probably do the same thing he did, very tough to do, but he basically convinces her to stay and he leaves and basically he's going to tell the family that, she didn't make it. She passed away on Fantasy Island and maybe she had wanted to be buried there or something. So they'll never be able to go see her. But and you got to think that that's going to come up later on in the season too, that, I can't imagine everybody in her family would settle for that. I mean, somebody would probably want to figure out exactly what happened to her or go visit her grave or something. So we might see somebody from her life reappear later on. But overall, one of the stories was okay. One I really liked. And I'm a little upset with some of the setup of Rourke, but, I'm on board. I think my wife is watching this and she's loving it. So I think that definitely means I'm going to continue watching it at least for the first season.
Yeah, it definitely had that Fantasy Island thing. You know, I've dinged some other shows like that the CW rebooted, like Nancy Drew, for instance, where it's like, this is Nancy Drew in name only. This is definitely Fantasy Island. I like that she is, connected to Rourke. I definitely noticed the same thing you did about the pilot who is a love interest. And I think that's just sexism about writing women characters, that they think they can't write a woman character if she doesn't have a love interest. I would hope over time maybe her number 2, Ruby, will become, her best bud and can have those conversations with her once she kind of gets up and running in the swing of things. That storyline was definitely more emotionally connecting with me than the news anchor one. My implication was absolutely that Long Pig was on the menu and she, ate her feelings, for her father to clear that. It was an interesting, both of those were interesting choices, I think, to cue us to what we can be in store for. So we can be in store for stories that are, the fantasy aspect of the Fountain of Youth piece is minimal, because once the elderly couple swaps out to the younger couple, the genre aspect recedes. But the thing with the news anchor, and they were definitely playing around, at least for me, maybe I wasn't paying attention all that well, but there were certain times where, through the film technique, she'd enter spaces and the food would seem like bigger than I thought. And it, like, even the character was confused sometimes about, like, did I just eat all that? Did that happen? Cause she'd kind of be reset back in her room sometimes. So I can't say like there was anything that like put me off the show, but it just didn't interest me that much. I might be tempted to try one more, but Fantasy Island was never a particularly favorite show of mine anyway. So that was also part of it. It was like, I have such limited time. It's like, yeah, this one's going to be hard for me to try to make time for.
It was interesting when Brent mentioned to the two of us, the day of the premiere, hey, don't forget Fantasy Island premieres tonight. And I'm like, Fantasy Island? And I had to stop and think, oh, that's right. That truly had, qualifying genre elements back then, and some of the stuff. And it's funny, I went looking for the trailer, for the show online, found it, and you could tell, some genre elements. And they also had on their YouTube channel like a 25-minute behind the scenes or introduction to the show. And I got sucked into that rabbit hole a little bit and started watching it. And it's some pretty fluffy stuff. It's, just a chance to talk to some of the cast, and everybody is just glowing about how wonderful this is going to be. There wasn't a lot to it, but it was interesting to see that some of the folks who were doing costume design and set design and other stuff talked about how, and, you, Brent, definitely pointed out, this is a continuation in that sense. They wanted to, have the same color scheme for her that, Ricardo Montalban had. The color, the same type of Jeep, a lot of the same aesthetic. They wanted to continue it. They wanted to do it right in the way they were doing it, which was good to kind of see. I can't say I seem interested in it at all, but credit to them. At least they seem to be doing it the right way. Love interest problems aside.
Oh yeah, and those elements that you talked about were very prominent in the start when she's going to greet the guests. That part did feel a little bit different because I was like, did this show always only have 2 stories and I forgot it? Or maybe I conflated it with the Love Boat, where it always seemed like the Love Boat had more people. But she has a suit that is absolutely, a derivative from Ricardo Montalban's suit. And they, very much key in on how she's dressed and her history, proud history of her family, being the, the hosts of this island.
Yeah, Wendy, I had the exact same thought you did and concern. The concern I had with the whole love interest thing was I had the same thought. Was how sexist? Come on, you need that for a woman in charge. And then I started talking to my wife about it, and I was thinking to myself, I don't think that's necessarily a sexist thing. I think that's a modern thing. I think if they had been a male host, they still would have had a female love interest. Because I don't think I agree with you that they have that problem a lot in TV shows where a female lead must have a love interest, but they do that a lot with males too. And I think it's just a modern thing where they can't have a lead mysterious character unless they have some sort of romantic love interest. And it's just, that part irritates me. But it was initially the same thought you had, which is, come on guys, this is very sexist of you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if it was a man, that it would be more Rourke-ish, and I don't think they would have a dwarf sidekick, but they might have a snarky sidekick.
Yeah. Well, they'd have a female sidekick and he'd develop a romantic relationship with her, I bet you. That's the modern take, I think. It's just, they can't do it without doing that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a sense for historically, I mean, maybe it wasn't as prominent that they were doing it in the first episode in the past. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really obvious. As soon as I saw the pilot and her interact in the very beginning, I'm like, oh, come on, guys. No, don't do this. And sure enough, they did it. But I'm also developing or sensing that it could be more of a Mal and what's her name, Inara relationship from Firefly, Kevin?
Yeah,
yes.
Inara. Yeah,
it could be a little more of that, which is kind of, they care for each other, a bit of flirting, but a lot of counseling, and it never quite gets there sort of thing. Who knows? I don't know. But I will watch next week and let you guys know. That's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Check out our Discord. Send us feedback. Appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin and Wendy, for being here. I'll catch you next time.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
If you'd like to contact us here at Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, we offer a wide variety of feedback options, including email at feedback@tuningintoscifitv.com, our voicemail at 706-927-8478, on Skype voicemail at Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, or you can visit our website at tuningintoscifitv.com to find the link to our forums or to use the SpeakPipe widget to leave us a voice message. You can also find us on Twitter at twitter.com/tuningintosci-fi or on Facebook at facebook.com/tuningintoscifitv.
The theme music for Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV is by Beatnik Turtle. Used with permission. Listen to Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV on Stitcher Radio on Demand. Download the free app today at Stitcher.com. You've been listening to Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, episode 583, recorded August 15th, 2021.